Welcome to Payback with Silas. Every day, a new story, lies, betrayal, payback. Let's begin.
23 years in the sky, reduced to a cardboard box and a sentence. We're restructuring. That was it. No gold watch, no ceremony, no thank you for keeping hundreds of flights calm in chaos. Just a neatly laminated form, a manila envelope, and a young executive named Cole Maddox with teeth too white to be trusted. He didn't even sit down when he said it. Just stood behind that stupid Scandinavian desk of his, next to his $8,000 standing lamp, and told me I was done. "We appreciate your service, Captain," he said, like I was some outsourced call center agent, not the guy who once landed a 737 in a Wyoming blizzard with one engine down and a hydraulic leak. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. That was my choice. I looked him in the eye, nodded once, and walked out of the office with the same discipline that's been drilled into me since flight school in Pensacola. But I need you to understand something. I wasn't angry about being let go. I was angry about being forgotten. My name's Russell Crane. I'm 57 years old. And until that Tuesday morning in May, I was the longest-serving captain at Ventrose Air, a mid-sized carrier based out of Portland, Oregon. If you've flown into PDX in the last 2 decades, chances are high I've guided your plane home. I joined Ventrose when we still had a handful of MD-80s and a vending machine that still took quarters. Back then, we were scrappy. Family-like. You'd know the ramp guys by name, share black coffee with the schedulers, and you'd call the CEO, Stan Whitmore, by his first name at Christmas parties. But things change. Stan stepped down in 2018, and with him went the soul of the company. The board brought in Cole, all Harvard polish and corporate buzzwords. The kind of guy who uses words like synergy and human capital, unironically. First, it was the uniforms. Then the crew lounges. Then training budgets. Then the soul-crushing arrival of efficiency reviews. And finally, me. The logic? My salary was too high. They could hire 2 younger pilots for what they paid me. Cole said it like it was math. Like I was a line item on a spreadsheet. I gathered my things, the framed photo of my daughter in her ROTC uniform, the worn leather logbook I still preferred over the digital system, my flight pins, the old checklist laminated in plastic with my initials scribbled in the corner. That checklist had been copied and distributed throughout the entire pilot fleet. I walked past the dispatch desk. No one said a word. Most of the old guard was already gone. The new crew looked up at me, some with pity, some with confusion, some not at all. But here's what Cole didn't know. He didn't know that I trained more than half of his captain corps personally. He didn't know that when Flight 892 lost avionics over Spokane, it was my voice the co-pilot heard in the sim 4 months earlier, drilling comms blackout protocol, until his hands bled. He didn't know that the emergency descent checklist? I helped rewrite that after the 2011 Denver incident. He thought he was cutting a name off a list. What he did was sever the spine of his operation. But that part, he'd find out later. For now, I drove home. No music. No tears. Just silence and the knowledge that something bigger than a job had just ended. But I also knew something else. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his unraveling. You don't spend 23 years in a cockpit without learning a thing or two about timing. Take off too soon, and you burn fuel. Too late, and you miss the window. It's all about precision. Listening. Waiting. So I waited. The day after my departure, I did nothing. I sat on the porch of my house in Forest Grove, sipping black coffee and listening to the wind. Not thinking about the company. Not even angry anymore. Just quiet. But like a flight path you've flown 100 times, certain things arrive right on schedule. The first call came that evening. "Russ? It's Benji. You got a second?" Benji Granger. Captain, age 42. One of mine. I'd trained him back when he was fresh out of the Navy, and still called every checklist out loud even during coffee breaks. He flew the LAX Seattle run like it was part of his DNA. Now he sounded tense. They pulled me in today, he said. Said they need me to train the new hires. Asked if I had your old SIN notes. He paused. Russ, they want me to replace you. I smiled. Not bitter. Just amused. Of course they did. Of course they thought you could swap a man like a seat cover. Don't do it, I said. They'll eat you alive. Benji didn't argue. Didn't protest. He just sighed and said, I already told them no. You're the reason I made captain. I'm not stepping into your grave. The line went quiet. Just a hum of air between us. Then, Russ, people are pissed. Within 72 hours, I had 6 more calls. Jules from Boston. Andy from Fresno. Tess, hell, even Tess called me. She'd once said I was too stuck in the old ways, and we'd argued for an hour about flap deployment speeds during training. But now she was livid. They canceled my check ride, Russ. No one left to approve it. Your name's still on the syllabus. One by one, the edges began to fray. Simulators sat empty. Flight instructors refused to cover double loads. 3 captains called in sick. Then came the cancellations. First 3. Then 12. By the end of the week, 76 flights grounded. They issued a vague press release. Weather conditions and unforeseen crew availability. Which was funny. Because the weather was perfect. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Didn't post online. Didn't rant. Didn't tell anyone to quit. But the thing is, leadership isn't something you can fire. It's something you build, flight after flight, word after word, moment after moment in those long overnights at the Denver Marriott, telling someone to shake off the doubt and trust the yoke. That doesn't vanish because of one memo. So I let the silence do the talking. Let the grounded jets become the message. And then, on day 10, I got a call I didn't expect. Russell Crane? Speaking. This is Dale Larimore, CEO of Helix Jet. Helix Jet. Private charter company. Scottsdale-based. Lean, elite, and fiercely pilot-owned. They flew celebrities, executives, sometimes even diplomats. I'd once turned down a recruitment offer from them 5 years ago because I was too loyal to Ventros. But Dale's voice was warm. Direct. No pitch. No pretense. I've heard things. About what happened to you. About what's happening at Ventros now. People like to talk, I said. Yeah. And some of us like to listen. A pause. We're building something here. Not just an airline. A culture. We don't need another manager. We need a mentor. Someone who knows how to train people, shape them. Someone who remembers when aviation was still about honor. Another pause. I want you to come here. Build our Captain Academy from the ground up. I leaned back in my chair, watching the wind tug at the trees. For the first time in days, I let myself really breathe. You sure you want a dinosaur like me? Dale chuckled. Dinosaur? You're the blueprint, Russell. We don't need more software. We need soul. And that was it. No bitterness. No revenge plan. Just a clean runway in front of me. I accepted. 2 weeks later, I was in Scottsdale, walking through Helix Jet's training hangar. The smell of fresh paint, the hum of brand new Embraer jets, and faces, bright, eager, ready to fly. I'd been discarded. Written off. But here I was valued. Not because I was convenient, but because I knew how to pass the torch without dropping it. That was the beginning of my new chapter. But Cole Maddox's unraveling? That was just beginning. They say when things go wrong in aviation, they go wrong in layers. One failure might not kill you. But stack 3? That's when the sky starts to fall. For Ventros, the 3rd failure came on a Wednesday. And it started with a missing voice. Cole Maddox had no idea how much of the airline's glue had quietly retired with me. He thought systems ran themselves. That simulators trained pilots. that SOPs enforce discipline. He didn't understand the quiet hierarchy of experience, how certain voices, even unofficial, held the flock together. I wasn't just training pilots. I was the one they called when the weather changed mid-route, when the checklist didn't match the reality, when the ground crew missed a gear door inspection and someone needed to know what it felt like to land dirty. So when I was gone, and others started walking too, there was no one left to answer the hard questions. The radios went silent first. Two of the most senior captains, Marcus Elwood and Jenna Kirk, both walked off duty mid-rotation. Technically not illegal. They'd both hit their FAA duty hour cap and refused to be talked into violating it, as had quietly become the culture. Without them, 5 flights across the West Coast grid sat idle on the tarmac. Dispatch scrambled. Crew schedulers sent texts. No one answered. Why? Because I wasn't answering anymore. You see, over the years, I'd become the invisible chain that kept the fleet flying. When young captains panicked mid-flight, they texted me. When scheduling needed a favor, they called me. I was the emergency contact for the emergencies no one wrote down. And now, the contact was gone. That morning, Flight VTR 2445 was scheduled from Denver to Salt Lake. Easy run. Clear skies. A new captain, Brendan Finch, sharp guy, just certified, but still green. He'd been trained by Marcus. Marcus, who I trained. Just after reaching cruising altitude, they encountered a sudden electrical spike, fried half the NAV system and knocked out radio number 1. Not a catastrophic failure, but unnerving if you've never flown partial systems before. Normally, someone like me would be on standby. But not this time. Brendan went by the book. Tried radio number 2. Dead static. Turns out, someone had forgotten to run the pre-departure diagnostics on the secondary antenna. The maintenance log was incomplete. They were flying blind, 34,000 feet over Utah. ATC lost contact. Panic. Planes rerouted. News outlets got wind. Jet loses contact with ground control over Rockies. It wasn't a crash. But it may as well have been for Cole Maddox. Within hours, every mistake, every cut corner, every blind spot he'd inherited and worsened came home to roost. Pilots refused overtime. 4 instructors quit the training team. The FAA began poking around, quietly at first, asking about sim logs, flight hour audits, maintenance schedules. And in the middle of it all, Cole. Frozen. Because for all his titles, he didn't understand one simple truth. Airlines aren't run by systems. They're run by people who trust each other not to die today. And right now, no one trusted him. I watched the headlines roll in from my desk at HelixJet. Dale poked his head into my office, grinning. Your old company's in the news again. Second day in a row. You seeing this? I didn't reply right away. Just sipped my coffee. You want to say I told you so? He asked. No, I said. That's not how this works. You don't gloat when a plane crashes. You learn why it fell out of the sky, and you don't let it happen again. But I'll admit something. Deep down, it felt damn good watching the structure collapse without me holding it up. 2 days later, I got a call. Blocked number. I knew who it was. I picked up. Didn't speak. Then I heard him. Russell. It's Cole. I need to ask you something. I waited. Would you consider consulting? Even just for a few weeks. Things are spiraling and I didn't let him finish. Cole, I said calmly, you already made your decision. You don't get to ask the man you discarded to put out your fire. He was silent. You thought you were cutting fat, I said. Turns out you cut your damn wings. Click. Call ended. I didn't hear from him again. I always thought once you close the cockpit door behind you for the last time, you don't go back. Flying teaches you to keep moving forward. No room for nostalgia at 35,000 feet. But 3 weeks after I hung up on Cole Maddox, I got an offer that made me stop mid-step. It wasn't from him. It was from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Russell. It's Whitmore. Stan Whitmore. The original founder and former CEO of Ventrose. The man who built it when it was nothing but 3 leased MD-80s and a pile of debt. He stepped down in 2018, early retirement, or so they said. In reality, he'd been quietly pushed out by the board when they wanted growth leadership, code for corporate puppets. And now he was calling me. "I've been watching," he said. "You were right. Cole's out of his depth. And now? The board knows it." I didn't say anything. He continued. "They called me in last night. Emergency meeting. After the FAA probe went public and 3 of the company's insurance underwriters started asking questions, they're desperate." That part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was what came next. They asked if I'd return in a temporary capacity. Clean house. Rebuild. I said yes, but only if I picked the team. And the first name on my list was yours. I let that sit in the air. I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't even interested in vengeance. But I was interested in legacy. Later that week, I flew commercial, middle seat, 31B, no uniform, into PDX. Funny thing about being a passenger after 23 years of flying, you notice everything. The nervous hands of the flight attendant during turbulence. The slow descent when it should have been tight and clean. The voice of the captain, young, uncertain, like he was reading the PA off a cue card. I knew then, with no bitterness, that I'd left this place in hands that weren't ready. Ventrose headquarters looked almost haunted. The reception desk was half empty, and the once busy crew lounge had the energy of a cancelled prom. I walked through the halls, not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as something else entirely. The ghost they never expected to see again. I met Whitmore in a small glass conference room. The board members were already seated, looking like a pack of wolves in suits who just discovered they were bleeding. "Captain Crane," one of them said stiffly. "We'd like to explore options for repair." I stared at him. "You want to fix a plane mid-flight?" "We want to land it," Whitmore said. "Then rebuild it." They wanted me to lead the full retraining initiative. Bring back the integrity. The discipline. Rebuild trust among the pilots. Fix what they broke. I had one condition. "I'm not coming back to save your numbers. I'm coming back to fix the culture. I get full authority over training and operations. No middlemen. No bureaucrats. If someone's in the way, they're gone. You agree to that, I'll consider it." The room was silent. Then Whitmore nodded. "Done." I didn't take the job for revenge. I took it because I realized something that day. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the people still flying broken planes and broken systems. About the rookies like Brendan Finch, left in the dark because no one bothered to teach them the way we were taught. It was about the name stitched above the left breast pocket, Captain, and what it used to mean. My first day back wasn't in a boardroom. It was in the simulator bay. I walked into the same training center where I'd been let go 5 weeks earlier. Same building. Same hallway. But this time, they weren't avoiding eye contact. They stood when I walked in. Some smiled. Some didn't know how to. And then Benji Granger walked over. He shook my hand without a word. And handed me the same laminated checklist I'd given him 8 years ago. "It's yours again," he said. We got to work. Over the next few weeks, we rewrote every checklist. Tore down the sim curriculum and built it from scratch. I brought back old captains, those who hadn't given up on the values we used to breathe like oxygen. Ventrose didn't need a manager. It needed a standard. And I was done apologizing for being the one to set it. But before this ends, there's one last flight you need to hear about. Because Cole Maddox? He wasn't finished. Not yet. And the next time we met, he wasn't standing behind a desk. He was sitting in my simulator. Some men know when they're beaten. Others have to see it, feel it, lose everything before they understand the damage they caused. Cole Maddox was the second kind. 3 weeks into my return to Ventrose, we were making progress. Sim sessions were full again. Pilots were talking, not just to dispatch, but to each other. There was laughter in the crew lounge again. Not the fake corporate, engagement, kind. The real kind. The kind you only hear when people feel safe again. But then, my phone buzzed. A single line from Whitmore. He's back. Apparently, Cole never officially resigned. He had taken administrative leave, pending board review. But now, with lawyers involved and contracts tangled, he was trying to claw his way back in through a loophole. Not as an executive. As a pilot. You read that right? The man who fired me, who slashed training budgets, bullied captains, and thought flight decks ran on spreadsheets, had a license from 10 years ago and a dusty logbook. And now he wanted back in. As crew. There was only one problem. Ventros had reinstated a policy I'd fought for years ago and finally pushed through again. Every returning or reactivating pilot must pass a Level D simulator check ride, signed off by a senior instructor. And guess who the senior instructor was? I didn't ask to be assigned. I didn't volunteer. But when the schedule came out, his name was next to mine. Cole Maddox. Sim check, CRN 215. Instructor R. Crane. Poetic. The day of the check ride, I arrived early. The sim bay was cold and quiet. I ran my hand along the edge of the throttle quadrant like I always did, not for luck, but for memory. The sim was programmed for a standard A320 Type 1 route. Denver to Burbank, minor turbulence, expected crosswind on approach. Enough to test judgment. Not enough to kill you. At 8:59 a.m., he walked in. Cole Maddox. Flight bag in hand, uniform pressed, headset around his neck like it belonged there. I could smell the cologne from 5 feet away. He gave me a look, not quite shame, not quite pride. Captain Crane, he said. I said nothing. He sat down in the left seat. I slid into the right. 2 minutes of silence as the systems booted. Just like the real thing. Then I said it. Captain Maddox, this will be a standard assessment. You'll fly left seat, I'll monitor. You'll demonstrate startup, takeoff, cruise, and a visual landing at Burbank. We will simulate a crosswind gust on final. If I give you a failure scenario, you will respond per checklist. No coaching. No feedback. This is your ride. He nodded. But his hands, they were shaking. Startup was rough. He misread the fuel panel twice, had to restart APU. I didn't say a word. Just scribbled notes. Takeoff was passable. Climb out, messy. Altitude callouts delayed. Speed too high. Twice I had to remind him to monitor vertical NAV. By cruise, his shirt was soaked through. He couldn't remember how to switch radio frequencies manually. He forgot the callout for top of descent. Then came the final approach. Runway 15 at Burbank. Wind gusts simulated at 24 knots crosswind. At 800 feet, he overcorrected. At 600, he dipped below glide slope. At 300, he yanked the yoke and ballooned. And at 70 feet, he lost it completely. The plane slammed into the runway. Simulated crash. Hard stop. Red screen. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just sat there, headset on, looking straight ahead. Cole exhaled like a man crawling out of a collapsed building. He turned to me. Russell, come on. That wasn't. I stood up. Captain Maddox, I said, voice flat, official, irreversible. This check ride is a fail. You will not return to active duty. Recommendation, retraining and requalification not advised. He stood too, but slower. His voice cracked, just a little. You're doing this because of what happened. The past. I finally looked him in the eyes. No. I'm doing this because you don't belong in that seat. Not then. Not now. Not ever. I turned. Left the sim. Left him standing there in the dark, blinking red cockpit, his legacy collapsing around him, not because I took revenge, but because gravity always wins in the end. That was the last time I saw Cole Maddox. He quietly resigned a week later. The board approved it. No farewell email. No press release. Just gone. Ventrose, though? Ventrose is flying again. Not because of one man, but because enough people remembered what it meant to carry the weight of 200 souls behind a locked door and 2 throttles. We rebuilt from the ground up. Pilots train harder now. We teach judgment again, not just buttons. I see it in the eyes of new hires. That mix of respect, discipline, and pride. I've still got a few years left in me. But now, when I sit in a simulator across from a young pilot, I start with a question no algorithm can answer. Why do you want this seat? Because that answer tells me everything.